ready?
Everyone, it's September 15th. We're breaking a record here, or making history. This is my first guest that's also been on a multi-guest pod and a solo guest. So this is Munaf of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. How's it going?
It's going. It's already NFL week 2 stuff. It's crazy. Like, the weeks are just absolutely going to fly by. I know we were just talking offline that we just can't wait for football season to get here, but it's like we're grinding away. It doesn't matter which day of the week it is, but glad to be here with you. I know we're going to talk about some fun stuff, but thanks for having me on again. Yeah,
of course. It's Friday. Very excited to have you on. I will deem you the prop king. So hopefully your bets do hit that we talk about later on in the show here. You watch the Thursday night football game, obviously, because that's kind of our gig here. We kind of have to watch the football game. What are your immediate thoughts, takeaways, feelings about that game?
Well, I think number one for me, what kind of stood out was the commitment to the run that the Eagles made during the game, right? I mean, we saw how bad the Vikings rush defense was. And I think there was one drive in particular where they were just running the ball down the throat of the Vikings defense, and they just couldn't even stop it. I think the Vikings even knew what was coming by them running the ball with DeAndre Swift and the success that he had on the ground rushing for 500 yards last night. But it was crazy to see that the Vikings just didn't have an answer for the rushing attack of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think their offense looks a little different now as well, right? They lost their offensive coordinator, obviously, to the Indianapolis Colts. But I feel like Jalen Hurts maybe is still getting used to the new offense. I know he doesn't look like the same guy he was last season, but that was my first initial thought, that this Minnesota Vikings rush defense, at least, I think it's going to be a long year for them here, Steph.
It is. And I will say, the start of the game, you're like, shit, the Vikings, are they in this game? Is this something? And then they blew it. They totally, once again, they found a way to just absolutely blow the game. I will say that I think that Brian Flores is making a difference. I think it bit him in the butt because it's kind of, they knew what to expect towards the end of that game. I know you do fantasy as well. Where are you at with DeAndre Swift long-term? Do you think that is a long-term starter that you can have? Are you putting him in that RB2 spot? Where are you at with him? Because I struggle.
It's really difficult for the Eagles, especially because you also have a running quarterback as well, right? With Jalen Hurts. I mean, I think for me, it's probably a week-to-week thing with DeAndre Swift. I think obviously last night was the spot to start him with Kenneth Gainwell, not being out there for them. I know he was dealing with a ribs injury, but I don't think Rashad Penny is going to be that guy. So I think you're right. It's probably in that RB2 position. I think it's going to be a running back by committee with Gainwell and Swift. I think obviously Nick Sirianni, of what he saw last night with Swift, is definitely going to have to utilize him more. So I think he's probably right in that, like you mentioned, that RB2 position for this Eagles team going forward.
Yeah, and what about Madison? I know I'm loading you with questions here, but, Alexander Madison, I think that usually fantasy football Twitter, I think, gets a little too heavy when they pile on. They decide, this player sucks. We are not going to draft this player. Were they right in this instant? Because but what is the game plan? We got to figure out a running game at some point here, Vikings.
Yeah, I think it was difficult for them. I think if you go back to week 1 with Ramondre Stevenson against this Eagles rush defense, he didn't have a lot of success, right? It was only 12 attempts. I think he only had 24 yards in that span against that Eagles rush defense. And we saw Madison struggle yesterday as well. Unfortunately for me last night, I did take the over on his receiving yards. It was at 16 and a half, Steph. He finished the game with 3 receptions, 11 yards. And his longest reception was 16 yards last night. So that kind of really infuriated. Yeah. So I think that eventually they will figure it out with Madison. I just think the first 2 weeks, the matchup was difficult, right? I mean, we talk about the Buccaneers. I know their win total still projected them to be, well below league average, but they still have a great defense. We saw that last week in week 1 against the Vikings. And then in week 2, obviously with the Eagles last night, it was just a tough matchup for him. But I think he's going to find his stride going forward in the season because we know, we saw it last season. this Vikings offensive is explosive, and I think that they're going to have to find a way to get Madison involved, whether that's rushing the football, even receiving the football out of the backfield.
Yeah, and I think people are really excited to be able to victory lap this, like, here comes the regression, here's the Vikings.
Yeah.
I kind of disagree a little bit in the sense where I think the Vikings are figuring out what this new identity is. It does not help that they have Ed Ingram, who, again, as a Giant, I was saying last night, I'm like, I would die for this Vikings O-line, which is embarrassing. Like, that O-line was atrocious. But like, listen, it didn't look that bad from what I watched on Sunday. So I think that they're going to end up finding their identity a little bit. I think we see Madison get hot. I always felt like he was going to have these spike weeks. I didn't think it was going to be a week-to-week type of guy. A lot of Twitter gets excited about certain things. Where are you at with the touchback? Because people were all over the place today.
So kind of going back, I think the Vikings last night, I mean, there was an opportunity for them to at least win this game outright. I know they covered the number, but they had 4 fumbles lost last night, 4 fumbles and 4 fumbles that were recovered by the Eagles, right? You just typically don't see that in the NFL. And then with Justin Jefferson right before the half, the touchback, I get the rule. I mean, it does make sense when you look at it on paper that if he fumbles it into the end zone, it's a touchback. Unfortunately for me, I did have the first half over last night, which at least at minimum it would have pushed for that game. But I mean, I don't hate the rule. I think that you're probably more mad if you had a Justin Jefferson anytime touchdown or you had Vikings first half to cover the spread or their money line last night. But I know a lot of people are against the rule, but I think when you kind of look at it and sit back and look at it on paper, I'm not too mad about it. I think you have to have control of the football as you're kind of going down. And if you're reaching for the pylon or the goal line, you have to have control of the football. You can't just, toss it into the end zone, hoping that you get the touchdown.
You fumble. Like, at the same time, it's just like, it's kind of your fault. I wasn't super angry because I did take JJ's under touchdowns this year. It was at 8.5. I just felt they have enough weapons that, he's going to be the guy that gets them down the field. Maybe he doesn't get there to that point. Yeah, I see Trevor in there. Kirk not throwing an interception. The thing is, like, he barely had enough opportunities. I didn't factor in Ed Ingram. We had a good night overall. Could have used that AJ Brown over receptions, but I think he was more frustrated than we were. Before we jump into some props, you're a Houston Texans fan.
Oh God, don't remind me.
I know, but here's the problem. Here's the issue, Munaf. I love them. I am obsessed. I love them. I am delusional. I took them straight up this week. Am I crazy?
Not against this Colts team. I'll say that much. I think the one thing that we do have going for us now is that we actually hired the right head coach for this team with DeMeco Ryans, right? I mean, obviously a former Texans player at that linebacker position. I mean, there was a lot of hype or a lot of excitement, I should say, when they did make the hire with DeMeco Ryans, right? Obviously being familiar with the Texans organization. Like I mentioned, he played for them. And the players were excited and wanting to play for him as well. Obviously, the last 2 seasons, I don't know what the hell was going on in the minds of that front office of hiring 2 dinosaurs. No disrespect. But I mean, we've seen a shift, Steph, that, we're seeing the younger coaches get hired throughout the NFL.
Yeah.
And obviously the Texans over the last 2 seasons, they just completely went the opposite direction. But I want to ask you, what do you love about this Texans team? But obviously, because I'm a Debbie Downer on this team here. Tell me what you like.
It says a lot about me. Like, I love a good, project. Like, they're just like, I love the team that everyone hates. Like, this team that they're like, oh, it's just the Texans. But they were a great team against the spread at the end of the season because they were feisty. Like, I think that they have a lot of players that are very much bought in. And then you bring in Ryans. And I think you get even more of that. They have a lot of pieces I just love overall across that entire offense. And I thought Stroud, he played a very respectable game. He didn't throw an interception. He blew over his passing yards over, probably because he had to do that with the way that the game was going. But still, I think he looked calm, cool, collected. Like, he did his thing. And I think that the Texans are setting themselves up for a lot of success.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. I just think that they're in a situation where the Texans are going to win more games than people realize, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I know season long, I like the under 6.5 for this team just because trying to go from
more 2 games than people think. I didn't.
I didn't think that. Okay, let's pump the brakes here a little bit. But I agree with you, right? Like I talked about this with when we did the team preview with Sean and Ryan on the Mothership Show for our
Yeah.
Sports Gambling podcast. Is that like we've laid the foundation now for us to find success going into the future, right? We got the
Yeah.
head coach, we've got the quarterback of the future. I know Ohio State quarterbacks haven't really panned out in the NFL. I know that that kind of
Mhm.
cliche has been there, but look, I was a huge fan of the Dameon Pierce draft pick last season.
Love
He
him.
had he was having a great season last year before he missed the final 4 games of the year with an ankle injury last season. We added I think Nico Collins is going to take that next step for this
Yeah.
team. John Mechie, he has a great comeback story after all the medical stuff that he had dealt with I think it was leukemia and then his torn ACL. Tank Dell, another guy that he wears his emotions on his sleeve. And when you talk about guys that, him being a local guy that went to the University of Houston, the pieces
Mhm.
are definitely there on the offensive side. I think the defense is what we want to be more excited about because, again, we talked about the Niners' former defensive coordinator and D'Amico Ryans. We added Will Anderson. We have Darius Stingley Jr. in the secondary. So there's, again, the building blocks are there. Again, this is going to be a growing pains type of season, but I
Yeah.
think for the future is very, very bright for this Texans team for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. And I think I've talked about this. I think I talked about it last week in the show. Like, it's very easy for fans to expect there to be like a coaching change, a quarterback
Yeah.
change, whatever it is, and they want immediate success. And I think that's partly like this generation where there was a little bit more forgiveness back in the day when, things didn't go right exactly. People weren't jumping ship, but they're so ready to jump ship. I have a Dameon Pierce dad shirt. I don't know. It slipped my mind. I should have wore it. He was like my favorite recruit last year. I should have wore it. Do you like the money line play for the Texans this week?
I think this is a good spot for them. I really do because I think they were a point underdog and now they're flipped to a favorite this week against the Colts. So, the first home game with D'Amico Ryan, CJ Stroud. I know the fan base is excited again with the team that we do have, but I think this is a good opportunity for them in division. The one thing I'll say this is that T.Y. Hilton has always been a killer of the Texans. I don't think he's playing in this game where he's on the roster anymore. So I think obviously that gives the Texans even more confidence. But first home game with CJ Stroud and D'Amico Ryans as the head coach. I know last week, like you mentioned, they didn't play the greatest game, but I think they were in that game up until halftime.
Clean, though. It was a clean game. And honestly, that score, I mean, look at what the Cowboys did by Giants. Like, it was still a clean game. They did their thing. And I think that for the first time having Stroud out there, you have a first time head coach. It was a very respectable game. Like, I think there's a lot to like about the Texans. I think there's a reason to be excited. I think that there is going to be a time where we start talking about the Texans as a game that you don't cross off anymore. Right. I think that the Texans are going to get there. For years, it was never like, oh, like they picked up a piece here that it's not going to really, push the. I think this is now they're on the right track. Let's talk about some props. That's why everyone's here. People want to bet some money. What do you got for me this weekend that you're looking at?
All right, well, I'll get you excited for this first player prop. Okay. I do like Darren Waller this weekend against the Arizona Cardinals. I do like the over 41.5 is what I got it. I think it's up to 42.5 now against the Arizona Cardinals. And I'll say this much: last season, the Arizona Cardinals were not very good against the tight end position. They gave up, I think, the most receptions per game to that tight end position. I think they were top 6 in yards allowed to the tight end position. And can we kind of talk about Darren Waller here? Is that prior to his injuries, back in the 2019-2020 season, when we talked about Darren Waller, he was in that conversation with guys like George Kittle, Travis Kelce, as far as production, if you want to talk about it from a fantasy perspective. But I'm just really fading this Arizona Cardinals defense against his tight end position. Last week, he had 3 catches for 36 yards on 5 targets. Yeah. I think this Giants offense will have more success, obviously, coming into this game against the Arizona Cardinals. Don't want to start 0-2, obviously, to the season. I think they do bounce back in a big way here, and I think Darren Waller will have a big game for this Giants offense. So I'm going over 42.5 right now, the current number for Darren Waller in this game against the Cardinals here, Steph.
Yeah, I promised myself I wouldn't bet on the Giants this week, which I'm not going to, but I think there's a lot of numbers to look at in that game. Some pretty low numbers on these players, obviously, because of last week. And you see this happen all the time. Team gets killed. You come out next week, Vegas readjusts. And sometimes they over adjust. And I think you've seen that in some of the numbers. I mean, for the Giants, and it's crazy, and it sucks to have to say this week 2, this is a must-win game. Like, you actually have to go in there. You have to win this game. And that stinks, because then then Thursday Night Football, we know how the Giants play in prime time, against the 49ers. Then you've got Seahawks, I believe, at home. And then you have to go on the road to Miami and Buffalo. Like, you've got to win this game. You cannot lose this game. If they do lose this game, I joked around, but I'm kind of being serious. I'm betting them 0-17 because I don't believe I don't think that they have it then. Like, if Andrew Thomas isn't playing, that's a huge issue. But I think against this Arizona team, like, they're not good is the bottom line. I think that their defense could probably apply a little pressure, but I'm not so nervous about it. Danny's going to have enough time. What happened in that game is not going to happen in this game. I think that things just went sour very fast. They were never winning that. The second that field goal got blocked, they were losing that game. And I knew it. I knew that there was no way that they were coming back from it. But I think the Giants can turn it around. I think that this is a big opportunity to do that. They've got to run the ball. They've got to get Danny to be able to air it out. And even like Danny, can we have some RPOs that are actually planned? Like, because a lot of that was not planned. His rushing yards were not planned last week. Like, a lot of that was just him running for his life because Evan Neal looked absolutely atrocious. Mark Golowski looked horrible as well. Hopefully he's not even starting. But for me, I know Thomas is listed as questionable. Robinson probably won't play. I think they're going to save him for a couple weeks. They don't really need him right now either. And they got to get the ball to the guys. Like, get it. Honestly, if it matters, get Sterling Shepard on the field then. Like, if that's what's going on, get someone that Danny has a connection with. But I think Dallas's defense is just that good too.
Yeah, I think, talk about Dallas's defense. I mean, probably one of the best in the league. If not, they're up in that conversation. We talk about the Niners having the best defense as well. But again, like you mentioned, it was going to be a tough, a tough hill to climb for the Giants, especially after that block field goal that was taken all the way back to the end zone for the opening touchdown, right? So I think it's a good bounce back spot going up against one of the worst teams projected this season. They know they're going to be in that competition for the first overall pick or second overall pick as well. Because they do have the first round pick of the Texans for this upcoming season as well. So I think I do like the Giants on the spread this week. I do think they bounce back. I think it's a huge week for Saquon Barkley as well.
Okay, you're making me feel better. I don't feel great about it, but I like 2 props on your Texans. That wasn't planned. I just really like these numbers. You can tell me if you prefer one or the other. I actually like both of them. I'm okay with people betting either of these numbers. Nico Collins over 47.5 receiving yards. You get that -110. I actually got it at 46.5, so that number is creeping a little bit. Robert Woods over 34.5 receiving yards. Here's the thing. Nico is going to be going against cornerback Dallas Flowers, who, if you're a PFF person, he is easily the worst coverage defender, overall. Like, he is just not good. And I think we saw Nico, he led the team in a 26.2% target share and a 64% air yard share, second in the NFL. I think people are seeing what Nico Collins can do finally. And I think that 47.5 is a little soft. And I think that's because, again, before Vegas starts figuring it out, and you kind of see this happen where they're giving a little, it's Texans. It's a Texans receiver. Let's bring that number down a little bit. But I think that they can have, a lot of success against this Colts defense here. And I really like what he did last week. I think he had 80 yards, 11 targets, 6 catches, something around there. And Robert Woods too. I think 34.5 receiving yards is pretty low for both of these guys.
There's a significant fall off in this wide receiving group when we talk about guys after Nico Collins and Robert Woods, right? We talked about Noah Brown being put on the IL because of the injury that he did suffer. So I think that will only be taken up by Tank Dell. But I did take Nico Collins over on his season-long receiving yards. So I'm not going to disagree with you here because he has to be that number 1 wide receiver for this Texans offense. And I think that he's starting to make those strides. Last week, like you mentioned, 11 targets, 6 catches, 80 yards. And again, Calvin really just absolutely went off in that first game for the Jaguars against his Colts secondary. So I'm not saying it's going to be something similar for Nico Collins. Hopefully it is for the sake for both of our bets. I think
the ceiling's pretty high for him. Like, I think we can see this game where it's like, oh crap, I probably should have thrown the dart and drafted him.
Yeah. I agree. So, I mean, last week you saw Calvin Ridley, 8 receptions, 101 yards. So I think that, Nico Collins can definitely be in that neighborhood. But you talk about Robert Woods as well. I mean, he's a seasoned veteran. He knows the
Yeah.
game. He's a great route runner. He's going to find those, soft spots in the defense and take advantage from there. So I'm not going to disagree with you on either one of those props.
Awesome. What other props are you looking at for this weekend?
Yeah, so let's go over to the Niners and the Rams game. It's a little square, but I can't get away from it. Christian McCaffrey, receiving and rushing, that number's at 97.5 right now.
Okay.
I think he definitely gets over this number, right? We saw what he did last week against the Steelers, just absolutely like carved him up. He played 2 games last season against this Rams defense. One was with the Panthers before he did get traded over to the 49ers.
Yeah.
And then obviously 1 game with the Niners. But in those 2 games, Steph, he accumulated 158 yards in 1 game and 149 yards in the other game. Right. And I think that this number at 97.5 is a little conservative. I think that he's going to be able to carry what he did last week against the Steelers into this game against the LA Rams. And I believe this game is in Los Angeles. I'm pretty sure we're going to see more 49ers fans than actual Rams fans in LA for this game. But I just can't get away from Christian McCaffrey, especially if the books keep putting this number at under 100 for his rushing and receiving yards combined. I'm going to keep taking the over until the books do adjust to it. So I'm expecting another big week out of Christian McCaffrey against the Rams this week.
Yeah, and this will probably be the last week that you get the opportunity to take an over on this, because I'm sure when they go to make that, they have that match against the Giants, and then moving forward, you're not going to see a number quite as low as that, especially because you saw him like consistently being used in the receiving. He's a great receiving back. We've seen that for years now. Where are you at with Brock Purdy?
I think the jury's still out on him, right? Like everybody's waiting for him to crash and burn. Like I don't get it, but I mean, he looked great last week. I mean, I thought there was going to be a lot of doubts for people coming back from the UCL injury. He threw for at least 2 touchdowns, I believe, last week, because I know my co-host was on his passing touchdowns last week. I just think that, again, Kyle Shanahan is putting him in the right spots, and I think that when he took over as the quarterback last season, for the 49ers, you kind of saw that playbook open up a little bit for the 49ers passing offense. So it's a great story. I wish that he continues to play well, because I do have Niners futures as far as Super Bowl and for them to win the NFC. But he's looked good in game 1. And I think, again, being with that coaching staff and that offensive line and the weapons that he does have around him, he can't make mistakes. And I think that he's proven that so far in his NFL career. So I like the kid, man. He's proven the doubters wrong so far.
Yeah, I love to root for these. I like the Texans, so I'm a big I like to root for the guys and
root for the little guys.
Yeah, I love it. So my next prop, everyone knows I do like a plus money interception prop. We were pretty successful last week in those. I'm being a little salty this week, but I think there's still some logic behind it. I do like Dak to throw an interception at plus 105. He still led the league in interceptions last season, period. And if you look at what he did last week, I feel like the Giants really, they just kept kicking themselves while they were already down. I mean, he only had 13 completions on 24 attempts and 43 yards.
Yeah.
I don't know how impressed I am with that. I don't know if I like the Giants defense more, if I hate my team more. I'm not really sure. But I think that we saw the Jets defense, and I think there's an argument for this defense to be we're talking, if not top 3, if you argued with me that they were, I don't even know. You could probably make a strong argument for number 1 and maybe convince some people. We have to see a couple more games before that we feel that way. They're probably going to be very exhausted with Zach Wilson at the helm. So it might be a lot of time spent on the field. But we saw Josh Allen throw 3, which I know is in his character, but it's also in Dak's character to throw some as well. Yeah. I think that they'll try to throw the ball more. They realize they didn't need to necessarily do that to kick the Giants' ass. So I like Dak to throw one, I think, this week. Where are you at with Dak?
I'm in your camp. I don't think he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I'll put it that way. Like you mentioned, he's led the league in interceptions. Last week, he didn't have to do a lot. When you get 2 defensive touchdowns, from your defense. You don't have to allow to do a lot on the offensive side. But now you're going up against a legitimate defense in the Jets, right? Especially that secondary with Sauce Gardner back there. I think that he's going to make those mistakes. We saw what Josh Allen did last week against his Jets defense, where he threw for 3 interceptions. If you're still getting this at plus money, especially Dak going up against his Jets defense, I'm not going to argue against it. Again, I'm not a Dak fan. Unfortunately, I needed a second quarterback in one of my fantasy leagues, so I had to pick him up.
I know, I get stuck with him all the time.
Yeah, so I think they do have a tall order going up against this defense. And again, we talk about that the pass rush for this Jets defense. If they're able to get home against Dak, and he makes some mistakes and throws the ball down the field, a tip pass here or a mistake there, I mean, you're going to catch this probably in the first half. Again, I think this Jets team, they're going to come out and play motivated. Everybody's doubting them now without Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson having to take over. But I think the success for this Jets team going forward for the rest of the season is going to have to be back on the back of their defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I put out a tweet with this is the best time of the year to bet these plus money interception props, because the market hasn't caught on to who's actually throwing them and who is not. Jared Goff in the hole hasn't thrown one in 354, 10, whatever it is, 59. I obviously bet that because all good things have to come to an end. I love Jared Goff, but I think they're going to try to air it out this week against the Seahawks. Oh my gosh, I already lost my train. Where are you at with Zach Wilson? That's what I was going to ask before I asked for your next prop.
I think I'm with the majority that I don't think that he's a NFL starting quarterback.
I love that the glimmer of hope that's going on Twitter, that we're actually going to believe that for the next whatever it is amount of weeks, 15 weeks, that he is going to actually carry this team to the playoffs. He's not a starting quarterback. He might be a backup quarterback for sure, because he can get the job done. We saw what he did. He is serviceable 100%.
And that's what he's going to have to do, right? He's going to have to be a game manager for this Jets team for the rest of the season. We saw it right after the game when they lost Aaron Rodgers. There was already the rumors that, hey, they're going to try to go out and try to get one of those veteran quarterbacks, whether that was going to be Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, Joe Flacco, whoever the case might have been, just because I just don't think this Jets team, believes in Zach Wilson. Like you mentioned, I think he can be a backup quarterback in this league. But I don't think he's a starting quarterback in this league. He's going to make those mistakes. And we saw it, when he came into the game to take over for Aaron Rodgers, 75 seconds into the game, that I think that now for this Jets offense, it's really going to have to be predicated on Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall, Michael Carter, that it's going to be maybe, screen passes, or they're going to just rely on the running game for this team. But I just don't think Zach Wilson is going to be a starting NFL quarterback. Maybe a great MILF hunter, but I don't think he could be a backup quarterback in this league.
Yeah, people want to
starting quarterback. I'm sorry.
If people want to dream about these really fun fairy tale scenarios, like Purdy, the Nick Foles, realistically, that doesn't happen. It doesn't come around very often. What's another prop you're looking at?
So let's go over to the game between the Dolphins and the Patriots. I'm going to go with Ramondre Stevenson over on his rushing yards at 50.5. Kind of the theme this week, like you mentioned, is that the books are eventually going to catch up, and they're buy low situations. I know he didn't have a great week one. We talked about the Eagles rush defense. They were able to limit Alexander Madison in that game. And they pretty much did the same thing with Ramondre Stevenson in week one, where he only accumulated 24 rushing yards on 12 rushing attempts against the Eagles. But last week, the Chargers were having a lot of success on the ground against this Miami Dolphins rush defense, right? They ran the ball 32 times and they accumulated 208 rushing yards. That was 6.5 yards per carry for that running back group. I think that when we talk about this game, that we always talk about Bill Belichick wants to take away your best weapon.
Yeah.
And I think for the Dolphins, that is Tyreek Hill, but I'm not sure he's going to be able to do that because this Tyreek Hill is just a dynamic of a player. But I think the strategy for the Patriots may be to try to keep this Dolphins team off the field, or at least the offense. And that's going to be running the football and, trying to take the, time off of the clock and try to shorten the game. But I think this is a buy low situation for Ramondre Stevenson. I'm going to fade this rush defense. I'll take the over on Ramondre Stevenson over 50.5 rushing yards.
Yeah, I very much like the call there. I noticed a lot of these running back lines are set very odd for right
Yeah.
now. Like I'll throw out another like two and then send it back to you. But even, I said I wasn't going to give a Giants prop, but I'm doing it. Saquon Barkley, longest rush over 16 and a half. I don't think that is, listen, it's still Saquon Barkley. They're going to have to run the ball. I think last week was not a good representation of what this team is, what they can be. And again, like unlike Dallas's I'm not impressed by Arizona. I think they will be able to, find some success getting pressure on Daniel. But at the same time, you need to win this game. It's not an option. So you use your best players. And
Yeah.
who is that? And it's Saquon Barkley. It's Daniel Jones's feet. It's Darren Waller. You have to get the ball to these guys. So I like that number. Derrick Henry opened at 78 and a half rushing yards. So I hit that over minus 115. It's moved to 85 and a half. I get that last week they didn't use him. I'm not entirely sure why, because when he was in the game, he looked like Derrick Henry, as he always does. But we know the Chargers run D. We know that Miami didn't need to beat them on the ground because they could just kick their ass with Tyreek Hill. Like it didn't matter if you used your running backs and, again, they're sticking Band-Aids on a lot, whatever is going on over there. But I really like Derrick Henry to go over that, even if it's 85 and a half, but I think we see a big game out of him.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the Titans, they don't want to get into a shootout, right? I mean, they like playing these low scoring games, and again, that offense is going off of Derrick Henry, right? I know they added DeAndre Hopkins to that wide receiving group, but I think this offense starts and stops with Derrick Henry. And I know, like you mentioned last week, he looked good against that Saints team, but now them being back at home, you and I are similar. Like we know our teams, we're either going to fade them where we know we can get some value, or we're going to try to back them. But I think, last season when I was fading this Texans rush defense, Chargers were down there in some of those same categories and some of those same metrics when their rush defense came into play. And again, I think that's something that's probably going to carry over into the season. Now you're going up against a top 3, top 5 running back in the league in Derrick Henry. I won't be surprised if he gets to 100 rushing yards in this game or stuff against the Chargers. So yeah, I'm not going to argue against that.
Yeah, early on, like I will easily look at whatever running back is playing the Chargers, whatever running back is playing the Packers. Like these lines are usually set egregiously low, and there's a lot of value to be found there. Why don't you give me one more prop before we get into some of these anytime touchdowns, and I let you get out of here and enjoy your Friday.
All right, let's go over to the game between let's go over to the Bills and the Raiders game.
Okay.
I thought this number seemed really low to me here. Stephon Diggs at 75 and a half receiving yards. We talked a lot about the Bills and the Jets game or from week 1, right? But in that game, Stephon Diggs still got 13 targets. He had 10 receptions. He still had 102 receiving yards. And now you're arguably going up against one of the worst secondaries in the entire league in the Raiders. And now you have to deal with Stephon Diggs, right? And we know Stephon Diggs commands the football. He's going to make it a point for him to get the football. He's a player that can be a down the field threat for you, or he can be a guy that can, catch those short passes and get those yards after catches. So again, we know that he's going to lead this team in targets. We know that the chemistry that him and Josh Allen have built over the past couple of seasons that they've been together. I think this is another opportunity for Stephon Diggs to be in that triple-digit mark for receiving yards. So I'm expecting this Bills team to bounce back in a big way at home against a porous Raiders defense. They should be hungry after what happened on Monday Night Football against the Jets. I will take Stephon Diggs over 75 and a half receiving yards against the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, I love it. Me and my Circa Survivor partner, we did pick the Bills. I actually think it's one of the safest picks on the board. And we hate to use safe when we're talking about Survivor, but you think about this team, it's the Bills. And yeah, it's a very disappointing, very emotional loss. It seems like they tend to have these, but then they bounce back in a big way. I don't think the Bills quite know their identity yet. I think Dable left, and I think we've seen the effect that has had on that offense. It's very clear. But at the same time, there's 2 staple pieces in this offense. While they still figure out their identity, that's cool. But we know what Stephon Diggs is. We know that he is reliable. We know that he is the guy, whether you need it to be short, whatever you need, he is there. And we know Josh Allen. Like, and when Josh Allen isn't, overreacting and you could tell that he was a little all over the place on Monday Night Football, throwing some interceptions that cannot happen. Right. I don't think that happens again. I think that he cleans things up because he's going to have to. And the Raiders are a great opportunity for this team to totally get right.
I agree. I think I don't want to say it's a buy low spot. Obviously, the number is at 8 right now for the Bills. But I think at least from a prop perspective, I think that the Bills are going to be what we're used to seeing them putting up points, and Josh Allen having a good game and Stephon Diggs having a good game, and their tight ends with Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. I think this offense should be firing on all cylinders against this Raiders secondary.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's make an anytime touchdown parlay together.
All right.
I'll rip off a couple of the guys that I think are definitely scoring. One of them is Tyler Algier. I think whether people like it or not, this is a guy I continue to draft in fantasy. You're not getting rid of him. Arthur Smith does not give a fuck about your fantasy team. He cares about winning. They did just that, right? Like, they're allowed to have this run-heavy offense. I felt like they were going to do that no matter what. Algier is going to be a staple piece in this offense, whether you like it a lot, whether you like it or not. I very much like Algier. If you're in on that one.
He scored last week. What was it? Twice last week? I know he got one for sure.
Twice. 15 carries for 75 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 yards per carry. Like, Bijan's going to be involved in his own Bijan way. Like, I think we need to separate the two players because I don't think that, it's not just this running back scenario. Like, I think that no matter what, Algier's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and when we talk about this Falcons team, especially led by Arthur Smith, they're going to be a very run-heavy team, right? Because he comes from, obviously, the Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator. He had Derrick Henry there, but when you have players like Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson, you could probably throw in Cordell Patterson coming out of the backfield for them there as well. It's run first, and then it's going to be passed with Desmond Ridder. So, I mean, he found the end zone, like we mentioned, twice last week. So, at plus 180, plus 175 is what I'm seeing right now for Tyler Algier. I think that he can definitely back it up again in this game against the Green Bay Packers.
Awesome.
I'll throw one out you for let's go to that Giants game. I'm really gonna sell you on this. I'm gonna go with
James Conner.
I'm going with Darren Waller. I like Waller to find the end zone.
Okay, I'm gonna do it. Shit.
I like Waller to find the end zone here. I wanted to give Saquon, but I think Saquon's already at a minus price. I don't like giving out those minus prices here, but like I talked about, this Arizona Cardinals defense just is not very good against the tight end position. And we talk about getting down into the red zone. Darren Waller presents a big target. I mean, he's a big physical guy. I think this is going to be a big week for him. He's right around plus 205 right now for him to find the end zone. I think that, again, I have him on one of my fantasy teams. I'm definitely going to be starting him this week, no doubt about it. I definitely think, he's going to find the end zone for this Giants offense.
All right, I'll take it. That'll be my one actual true Giants bet, is whatever this parlay comes out to. All right, I have a couple of interesting ones. I will let you make the decision on this.
Okay.
Jamal Williams.
I had that on my list.
I know it. Do you? Yes. Okay, so that's an automatic lock. I know we don't love it, and that's fine. But I think what people need to realize is he had 75% of the freaking snaps. Like, he's on the field. He's going to be Jamal Williams. And I think it's only a matter of time until you see him get into the end zone. They're going to need him in this game. They're going to run the ball. We saw what Breece Hall did. We saw what the Jets, offense was able to do in the run game against this Bills team. So I like Jamal Williams. So I think we throw him in there. You get nice plus 145 the last time I looked at it. But if you're in on that, so we'll add Williams as well. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of goes back to last week, right? What the Falcons running backs were able to, like we just talked about with Tyler Algier, were able to do against the Carolina Panthers, right? And like last season, Jamal Williams had 12, 14 touchdowns last season for the Detroit Lions. Yeah. So I think that until Alvin Kamara gets back, like you mentioned, he's going to get those snap counts. He's going to get the targets there as well. So I'm with you. Jamal Williams was one of the guys on my list as well.
All right, last call is on you. Who are we adding to this? We'll make it a 4-leg.
Oh man, Let's take the shot in the dark here, or not in the dark, but I think with some a big price here to add to the parlay.
I love it.
Deshaun Watson plus 450 to find the end zone against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I hate it, but I think I love it.
You go back to last week, and I'm talking from a guy that has watched Deshaun Watson for many years when he was with the Texans, that when he did get down into the red zone or that goal-to-goal opportunity, he wasn't afraid to use his legs. Last week, he did find the end zone against that Cincinnati. Cincinnati Bengals defense there. I think he had one for sure. I know because I had money on the Browns last week. But yeah, he had a 13-yard touchdown run for the Browns last week. And again, we saw the struggles that the Pittsburgh Steelers rush defense had last week with Christian McCaffrey. And I'm not saying that Nick Chubb won't be able to find the end zone, but I think what's going to may happen is that if they get down to that, inside the 10, I think the Steelers are probably going to be expecting Nick Chubb to get the handoff in. They're going to focus on him where, if Deshaun Watson sees an open lane, he's able to pull that ball back out and run in for the touchdown at plus 450. I think there's some great value there for him to find the end zone in back-to-back weeks.
I love it. We're in on it. All right. So it's Algier, Waller, Williams, Watson, 3 W's and an A. I will post that after on my Twitter. Before I let you go, I need to ask you a question.
Sure.
How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Not a lot. Why are you asking?
There we go. Okay, thank God. See, I think everyone's full of shit. So it's a whole thing. I think it's trending on TikTok. I don't know. I guess girls are asking guys in their lives how often they think about the Roman Empire. I tweeted it out. And apparently most of them, which I think they're full of shit, think about it more often than I think they actually do. They're like once a day, once a week, once a month. I'm like, there's no way you don't think about the Roman Empire.
I think the last time was probably when we took high school history or something.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. I don't even know when you would have learned that in school. Give me a fucking break. You guys aren't thinking about the Roman Empire. Focus on football, all right? Do something.
It's football season. What are we talking about?
Give me a break. Talk about the Roman Empire. All right, let everyone know where they can find you before I let you go. We'll have to get you back on again very soon. Hopefully we hit some of these bets. But where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on, I still call it Twitter, but if you want the official name,
it's Twitter X. On the show.
Yeah, you can follow me there at SportsNerd824. But you can follow all my work over on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Either you could download our app or just go to the website, sportsgamblingpodcast.com, covering the NBA, MLB, obviously the NFL as well. And again, we have a whole separate pod where we just talk about player props. Whether that's for NBA or NFL, like we are talking about right now. So, yeah, you can find all my work there on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network.
Yeah, Munaf is fantastic. Oh, we didn't talk about hair. We got to talk about hair.
Really quick. I got time. I got
time. So I didn't know it was a beard issue too. I tweeted out, I'm like, I have like 7 female followers. I recognize that, my outreach is not necessarily a lot of females. It's a lot of 40-year-old men. I accidentally got my hair wet on a non-hair washing day. Disaster. Because then you have to restart the whole process. But I didn't know it was a beard thing too.
Oh yeah, it is for me because like you mentioned, like you want to take a body shower, you don't, it's something with the hair as well, right? Like you don't want to, because when we get the water in the beard, like at that point you just got to wash it. Because with the way I like maintain it, like I'll go through a whole process. I'll put the conditioner in and I'll put the oil in after I'm done and the moisturizer, and then I'll blow dry it to kind of get it straight and make it look presentable. So. As much as I'll try to avoid getting water into the beard, it's very difficult not to do it. But yeah, there's a whole process that goes behind, maintaining a strong beard, I should say.
Disaster. I did it. Actually, it's funny. I was going on Sean and Kramer's first VSiN show.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to just like rinse off, like not a whole thing. And I was stressed out. So I put my head back and I was like, no, you moron. What are you doing? We are not washing your hair. All right. That was the washing part of the podcast. We'll head out of here. Munaf is fantastic. I'll have to get you back on very shortly. All of the picks will be in the Substack. Producer Ryan does a great job with that. Like and subscribe if you haven't, and have a good Friday. See you guys.